Hello, everyone, and welcome to our schedule reveal show. My name is Carrie. You may recognize me from Uprising's TikTok account, but if not, I am a member of the content team here on the Uprising, and I'm just super excited to be able to hang out with you guys today. So before we get into the show, I just wanted to go over a couple of the giveaways that we have planned for you guys. Up front, we do have an Uprising jersey giveaway planned, but that one we will be going more into the details of that halfway through the show. So just be sure that you stick around to get the details for that. But right now, we are going to be doing more of a raffle style giveaway. So it's going to be for 1,000 Overwatch League PC tokens. And basically, all you have to do to be entered into that, it's super easy. You just need to be watching the stream. So again, be sure you stick around during halftime. I'll be coming back and we'll be randomly picking out a winner from all of our viewers. So it's that easy. And again, it's for 1,000 Overwatch League PC tokens. So while they're getting ready, we have like a couple of fun little interactive things you can do in chat. We're going to be having a couple polls if you guys want to participate in those. And just maybe some like trivia and stuff like that. So basically just keep an eye on Nightbot. Our first poll did just go up, which is which role are you most excited to see? We have our tanks, our support, or our DPS. So excited to see what you guys think about that. And then really quickly wanted to take a minute and mention that our shop is now open, our merch shop. There's a command for that as well. I believe it's just !merch. And we do have free shipping on all US orders right now, so it's a really good deal. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there, including the shirt I'm wearing, the jacket I'm wearing. We have a really cool, I actually have it here, we have a really cool new beanie design, which is super cute. And then we also have like this just gigantic Boston Uprising mug. It's literally the biggest mug I own right now. And if you're like me and you need literally a gallon of coffee in the morning to get going, it is the perfect size. So just a lot of really cool stuff. We have like old season jerseys, hoodies. You should definitely check it out. And again, that's free shipping on all US orders right now. So it's a really good deal. And then I'm curious what you guys think of our roles. I know we have another poll coming up, or did it already get posted maybe? I'm not sure. But we have another poll that is how you play Overwatch, which I'm really curious to see the results for that. I personally play on PS4, but I have tried it on Switch and it's like a completely different game. So mad respect for all you Switch players out there. I can see that just went up. And then one last thing before I go, which is in addition to our merch shop being out, it'd be really great for you guys to also just check out our main website because we do have a lot of really cool articles going up there. We have a lot of new members on our roster this season, and we have a lot of really cool like get to know the player articles. In addition, we have like our veteran players talking about their Overwatch League experiences. So just like a lot of really cool stuff and articles for you guys to read and get to know more about us. So that's definitely something else you guys should check out. Looks like 89% of you play on PC, which honestly is what I was expecting. But we have some Xbox players, okay. Basically, that's all from me. I know you guys are 100% ready to hear the breakdown of our 2021 schedule. And again, be sure to stay tuned because halftime I'll be back. I'll be announcing the winner of the raffle, which is again for 1,000 Overwatch League PC tokens. All you have to do is be a viewer. And I'll also be going into more details about our Uprising jersey giveaway. But with that, it is time to start the show. I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and I hope you guys enjoy. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, like Carrie said, to our Boston Uprising schedule reveal. My name is Matthew. I am the social media coordinator here for the Uprising. You may also know me as Haitian Homie. You may also know me as the Reinhardt inting in your ranked games. If you saw that, no, you didn't. Anyway, we're really excited to have a few guests here with us this evening. I think it's going to be a great show. We have a lot to talk about. We have 16 regular season matches to get through. So over the next 2 hours, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about a lot of different aspects of our team, the season, the schedule, the format, all of it. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop those into chat at any time. I'll do my best to get to those as we get the chance. But we're going to go ahead and bring in our 3 guests. So with us this evening, say hello to Punk over on my right, I guess.
Hello, everybody.
Our off tank for the year. Below me is assistant coach Ascoft. Actually, finally here from France. So,
Yep, finally. Hello, boys.
nice.
Hello, everyone.
And then to my bottom right, we have assistant general manager Mineral. How are you doing this evening? Oh, you're muted on my end.
Oh,
Sorry.
There we
doing
go.
very well. It's still the off season, still warming up. So yeah, doing very well. Very excited about it.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and dig in here. Just some questions for you guys before we talk about the schedule. Tell me a little bit about what you did this off season, what you've been up to, and where you're at right now.
who's starting?
I'll go first.
Let's go.
I've just been hanging out at home. It's summer back in Australia, so going to the beach a lot, hanging out with friends, catching up with people. Yeah, basically just having a vacation from Overwatch. Didn't play full time, but I think that's a good thing because right now we're all getting back into it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I saw your photos. I'm a little bit jealous that you guys had all that sun and you come here to
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah, COVID free as well. So basically,
Yeah, you
like
don't have to
normal,
remind me. Don't
normal
remind
at home.
Yeah, well, for me, it was a bit different because there is lockdown in France, but most of my off-season anyways was on helping doing the trials to rebuild the team. I'm also doing a part-time master degree on performance psychology, so that's taking a bit of time as well. And otherwise, yeah, I was just at home mainly with my girlfriend.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, not much different from for me. I think it's the same as Ascoft. I've just worked a lot on kind of helping rebuild the team, the roster that we put together for this season. That took most of the time. Obviously, since the off season is super long this time around because of COVID, there was quite a bit of dead time as well. But got here to Boston a little earlier. Help kind of set everything up for the guys so that when we get here, we can get them. Everyone's happy, everyone's living comfortably, and at the same time, staying safe during these times. So, just been kind of working on helping set all of that up.
Yeah, actually, well, while we've got you talking about that, can you expand a little bit more about what your new role is as assistant GM?
Sure. So, I mean, I'd say during the off season, my role didn't really change much compared to how it was last off season when I was the head coach. I was still, sitting in on all the tryouts. I was still a part of the decision making in terms of, who we should pick up and all of those things. Similar to last year, I also handled a good chunk of our recruitment talks, whether it's with players, with coaches. All of those processes I also handled. Beyond that, I mean, we'll see how my role changes kind of heading into this season, mid-season. I'd say, I bring in kind of a unique perspective in terms of having been a pro player, coach, manager, journalist, content creator. I've done like a little bit of everything in esports, and that's something certainly that I'm excited about helping out as well, kind of on the content creation side and the branding side for us. I think we have a lot of great things in store for the fans that you guys will be very excited about on the content side. I know you guys are very excited. So we'll be bringing that to you guys. Well, other than that, I think mid-season we'll see. I'll kind of dabble with everything. I think we'll see how my time gets distributed, but I'll be there to kind of just give advice where I see fit. I have a pretty good feel of what a functional team environment looks like and what a non-functional team environment looks like. So I can kind of pick and choose where I can contribute and kind of push things in the right direction for us. Obviously, more so the big picture stuff. The coaching is going to be, it's going to be the Ascoft to Baroy, and obviously, it's Laurie's ship. It's Laurie's show, so he's going to be handling all the decisions on that front. But I'll be trying to help out wherever I can, kind of use my experience in all of these fields to, help Uprising be, successful on all fronts.
And I think, you raise a good point that it really does change as the year goes on. And I think what a lot of people don't see is just how busy things get during midseason, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about things like hero pools and the coaches are really going at it full force. And it's good to have that kind of support system. So I think it's good to have more, in your case, adding an assistant GM who can help be that support system for the players and the coaches. So thanks for explaining, because I think a lot of people had questions about, what the new addition to the management staff was. So you guys are, like I said, here in Boston. Welcome. How's your quarantine going?
Pretty
good.
good. Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, the apartments are great, so I love the snow personally. So
tell me a little bit more about the apartments.
well, it's like last year. Like it's so great. I think to have like everything set up. So I just arrived. I have like my apartment. There's everything I have on the kitchen, bed, everything. So the apartment is great. Like it's brand new. So and we're all like in the same building. So yeah, I think it's delivering when we see the qualities of like the life qualities that some other teams can provide or not. I'm really happy to be in Boston for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
So for the guys who aren't here yet, soon Fusion's Coach Baroy, can you give fans any sort of expectation about when we might be able to see them here in Boston as well?
Sure. I mean, it's every situation is kind of unique, as they all are. I think there's a lot of teams that are kind of struggling a little bit to get their guys to their home markets, depending on where the players are from. I'd say, for Soon and for Baroy, they joined a little bit later, so their visas are still kind of in the final stages. Hopefully, we'll be able to get them here at some point in March. As for Fusions, he does have an active visa already, so we're all clear on that front. The issue is just kind of the national mandates that they have put in place in the United Kingdom, where they're not really letting anyone fly out due to kind of the new strain that that kind of happened, I guess, a couple of months back. So we're still essentially waiting for that, and fingers crossed that the trajectory of COVID cases in the UK keep going down, and then hopefully we can get Cam here sooner rather than later.
Nice. Yeah, well, hopefully it does work out. Yeah. Do you have, in the worst case scenario, let's say they weren't able to make it, what sort of discussions have you guys had with the league about the sort of new ping system that they've implemented? Does it seem like things are going to be working pretty smoothly as far as the online environment goes if they do have to play on ping?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's going to be rules put in place where, when you play against a team from Europe, you're all going to have a certain amount of minimum ping, just to kind of even the playing ground a little bit. So, we'll see how that works, especially if we play European teams. Soon and Cam would essentially be on the same ping as the European teams, so we would necessarily have a disadvantage there. But I think League has handled it pretty smartly, implementing this system. So hopefully it leads to a season where the competitive integrity stays intact despite the geographical and kind of like all the issues essentially that COVID brings
right
this time.
Nice. Well, one last question before we take a look at our schedule for the first time. Now that our roster is set and all the pieces are starting to come here together in Boston, what are your first thoughts on this roster that we have put together for 2021?
What do you think, Punk?
I think it's a very good roster. I'm really happy with all my teammates. I think I watched a lot of the trial scrims and participated in them as well. And I put my 2 cents forward to each player and said, this guy's good, that guy's good, this guy wasn't great. But I think in the end, I'm really happy with how it's ended, because I think we've got a good mix of the players from last year who, were the core this year, and so we've kind of got the core from last year, and then obviously the WGS or Korean core, and I think it's a good mix. There's not too many of one or too many of the other. I think there's a lot of pros. We have 4 DPS now. I think we fill out every single category or hero in that, which is great. And then I think now it's just playing together and practicing before the league starts, where we get a chance to synergize and basically get prepared for the season.
Nice. Yeah, I know you've been duoing with some of the new guys over the past couple days. Now that you're all on the same ping, so hopefully you get that synergy going together before the season starts. Nice. Well, let's go ahead and take a good look at our schedule for the 2021 season. Once again, they've split up the season into a set of tournaments. We've got 4 tournaments this time around. And the way the Overwatch League is set it up, we're going to have 2 matches per weekend that we play. There will be 3 weekends of qualifiers. We'll play in 2 out of the 3. The other one is a bye week. Then if you qualify in NA or the the West region, that means the top 6 teams will qualify into the tournament. You'll play in the tournament the following weekend, and then you'll have a bye, and you'll reset, do it again. So how do you like this sort of pacing for the season? I know I saw some comments on Twitter today when we showed off the schedule that said this seems like there's a lot of bye weeks. Do you like that the season is a little bit more slowed down?
Oh yeah, I like it. Personally, I like it. Definitely. Like it. The fact that they give us time. For instance, if like you have a rough week, you have like one bad match, and last season the problem was that like you only had you could barely take one day off. Maybe you had the match 5 days after, So it was really stressful for everyone. The fact that there is more time between competition, it's definitely good for us. I would have liked, the only thing I dislike kinda about this, the way they done it, is not to do a big break at some point. I think there is always sometimes you have 1 week of break between 2 tournaments or that kind of stuff, but you don't have one big break of 2-3 weeks when maybe they do an invitational, It's the only critique I can do. Otherwise, in terms of all of the changes that they've done on the format, the hero pool and the hero bans and everything, I think it's great. It's going towards the right direction.
Right. So actually, let's talk about the hero bans for a second, because they mixed those up this year compared to last year. So this time around, 2 of the tournaments will have hero bans. And from my understanding, it'll be the same set of bans for the entirety of the qualifiers and the tournament. Then the next tournament will have no bans at all. And then we'll go again. Playoffs won't have any bans. Does this system seem like kind of a natural evolution? Does it seem like a step forward for hero bans?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's there is no surprise anymore because you're playing on the same patch. I think they said as well that they're not going to change the patch between tournaments, or they're going to change actually between tournaments. They're not going to do it during a tournament or during the qualifiers for the tournament. So you're certain that for 1 month you're going to play one meta and you have time to actually learn the meta, which was one of the main issue last season as well, where you had 5 days to figure out the meta and the teams were selecting 1 or 2 days before what they were actually going to play in the official. So you had maybe it was fun to watch, but in terms of actually level of play, it was for sure less good than what this can offer.
Yeah, I think they've found the balance between keeping things interesting and mixing it up with the hero bans, and letting the teams have enough time to prepare, because obviously, like Val said, last year it was every 2 weeks or something, and the teams just wouldn't really find the ideal way or the best way to play each comp, and so it got a bit random and hectic. People would try something new on the match day and it would work or it wouldn't, and so I think it's a good amount of time on each patch and hero ban phase that I think it's going to be the best Overwatch it can be, which is good.
Yeah, and I like what Ascoft brought up as well. It's not just the hero bans that are staying the same, but also the patch. So it's not like a patch halfway through a cycle is getting changed. So it really feels like they're going for stability here, so you know what to expect for several weeks at a time at any point in the season.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we talk about the individual matches, what first glance you look at the schedule, what is the one matchup you think you're looking forward to the most so far? We'll start with Punk.
Our first one against Gladiators again.
Yeah, that's what you said last year too.
Yeah, that's what I said last year. I think 3 days before we actually played them or something like that, and then we ended up beating them. My first game ever in Overwatch League, which was pretty awesome. But I think I'm excited for that one again because they're kind of like the Juggernaut. They've tried to build themselves as Juggernaut team this year, which they've done every time. But who knows? Maybe they'll do it. But yeah, I like versing Face and Space and just all those guys because I think it's always a good match.
Nice. What about you, Ascoft? What are you looking forward to?
I'm not sure. I would tend to say the Paris, playing Paris, like the Paris match. Playing Paris is always do something for me, but I'm kind of looking forward to the Shock match. Actually, I know it's kind of late
Really?
in
Okay.
the season. Yeah, I think it's great to play against them. Like last season when we played against them, obviously we had like a lot of problems and everything. It wasn't really a match. They kind of dominated. But this year, I really want to compete against this kind of team. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this match, I think.
Not gonna have to worry about Super Skenji. Yeah.
I hope
No.
not, because that's the secret weapon. But
That's a secret weapon. What about
Yeah.
you, Mineral?
So there's a couple of ways to go there. I mean, in general, I've always kind of looked forward to the Mayhem matchups, especially when we had the homestands, because I would get to see a lot of the guys, my former players, my former coworkers, and that was always very fun to compete with them, but also actually see them since we haven't seen each other in a while. But I mean, those are pretty late in the season. I say one matchup, especially if we're looking at stage one, that I'm looking forward to is probably the Justice matchup. I think a lot of interesting ways to look at that one. Obviously, super tough team, super team. Everyone's kind of pegging them at the very top. So many superstar players. So it's going to be a great test for us to see like where we're at early on in the season. You also have that kind of side storyline, where a former player leaves, goes to another team, and the first time they actually play their former team with Jerry. Obviously, moving on to the Justice. I think the fans always love those storylines as well. So I think that's kind of a matchup that everyone's going to enjoy, and it should be competitive, I think so.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of me a little bit because we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Jerry factor in a little bit. But yeah, so I mean, we look at our first week of the season, and we actually don't play in the first week of the season, which is, a little anticlimactic. The past 3 seasons in a row, longtime fans will know we've played against New York. Obviously, that can't happen this year because New York's playing from South Korea. But, we're one of the 4 teams in the West region that won't be playing in week 1. As a player, Punk, what are your thoughts on not playing the first week? Is it a chance to look at the competition and kind of size them up early, or does it feel like a letdown that you're not, in on the action from the start?
It's a bit disappointing, I'm not gonna lie, just because, it's opening week, you want to be in there, you want to be there for the start of the Overwatch League. But as you said as well, it's a chance for us to like sit down and watch and kind of like get in the atmosphere of match days and in stuff like that, but without playing a match. So we get to sit down, probably watch it as a team, analyze, just be viewers that day, but also be critics and kind of figure out who's good, like how things are going, and just kind of maybe even hide our strats until we actually play. So it's got its pros and cons.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And, I'm sure that you guys will be taking a good look at, your early opponents come week 1. So hopefully we get to take that extra week and just run with it. But when we do get to week 2, our opening weekend, we're going to be opening with, like you said, Punk, your favorite match of the season that you're looking forward to, the LA Gladiators. So let's take a look at this new Gladiators roster. It is a team that fans know we are historically quite good at beating. But their changes this season are headlined by 3 major swaps. We've got Muse coming in for playoffs, and then they'll lose out. But does this season feel like, looking at these roster changes, does it feel like this could finally be the year that they break that trend and trend into like the top 4 or something?
I feel like it has to be, right, at this point.
I mean, it's like make or break at this point.
Yeah, I think they've done this every year when they've tried to revamp and have like the super team. Even last year, they looked really good at the start. They had pretty much that whole roster, but with Big Goose and Shaz, and even then, that's a scary team. Bird Ring, Mirror, Kevstar, Space, and I think they've always just fallen short. But I think this is the year where they have to prove that they're the juggernaut and one of the best teams, because they've got all the pieces now. There's no excuses, I think.
Do you feel like if you were on that team, you would view it as a failure if you weren't like making the top 4? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's hard to say at the start, at least. There's always, because it's about team culture as well. So who knows? Maybe because it's still the Gladiators and they've still got half that team, that they'll still struggle in like the later and like upper echelon parts of the league. But it's hard to say with all these new people coming in because I feel like they have to succeed. I feel like they will.
Okay. I mean, yeah, they look like they're going to be a tough first opponent. I know you also have some experience with their coaching staff. Face is from Australia as well. Like, I hate to pull the token Australian card, but I know since you've worked with him, what kind of style does he bring to the Gladiators? Because you were talking about like that team culture, and what does he bring to their team?
I don't think many people know about Face. He's kind of a passive guy. He likes to go on long runs in LA, but no one really hears much else besides
Sounds like
that.
you're writing his Tinder profile.
But he's a smart guy. He's a good coach. I loved working with him, and he's great at like talking to players individually and saying, "Hey, you should do this more," or like kind of the micro, I guess. But he's not. I don't think he's the leader of that team. Like coach, I think obviously that's Depe, but I think Face had a good part in picking the candidates that they picked up. Like I think Muse was a big, Face was a big reason why Muse is on the team now because obviously they worked together. I think in Pacific Contenders maybe 2 years back, and they did really well in the showdown or the Gauntlet. So yeah, I like Face. He's a great guy. He's a good friend.
Okay. Nice.
Good coach.
Nice. I mean, for those in the chat who might not know, you two worked together on Team Australia, right, for the World Cup?
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously that went pretty well for you guys.
Yeah, that did. No, it was good being on that team.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Gladiators later in the show because they're one of the few teams that we play twice this season. So we'll dig into them a little bit later as well. Week 2 for our first doubleheader, we're going to be playing against the Dallas Fuel as well. Now, this is a complete overhaul. I mean, they took this roster and just blew it up. They hit the reset button this offseason. They got rid of everybody except Doha. They got rid of all the staff, snagged a bunch of players from the Paris Eternal, and made Element Mystic 2.0 in the Overwatch League. Ascoft, I know you and I, in some interviews that we've done in the past, we've talked about team synergy and how important that is.
Yeah.
And subtle plug, if you haven't read that article, go to bostonuprising.com and check that out where Ascoff talked about synergy. But, I mean, having that team synergy where they've worked together in some cases for years, does this sound like a good way for the Dallas Fuel to, step up for 2021?
Definitely. I mean, for me, it's not even the Dallas Fuel anymore. I remember not so long ago when they played the Asian tournament, where people were going crazy, like because Dallas Fuel won some match race, and they were like, "Oh, the curse is broken." And everything. To me, it really felt like Dallas was not Dallas anymore. It's not the team that was Dallas last year. They literally picked up the best players. It feels like a lot of like the best players I feel that are available. They picked up players from Paris and coaches as well. And like they make up the Element Mystic team that was so dominant in Korea. So as you were pointing out, like I think synergy is like super, super important. Like players clicking together is something that is hard to create. It takes time and it takes a little bit of chance as well, or like personality kind of stuff. So having that plus the fact that you have top tier coaches and top tier players, like this is just a brand new team. This is not Dallas anymore. This is not the Dallas that we used to know. It's like a top tier contenders now.
So that, I mean, you're getting into my next question, which is, do you really think that these guys are as scary as fans make them out to be? Because I know fans, Dallas fans especially, they go crazy for their team, but I mean, they think
and then there's a circle,
they think they're going to be a top team.
Yeah. I think it's reasonable to expect that. Like when you have such a good roster, you have like evidence that some of the players are working together. In fact, almost all of them are working together. The coaches, you have evidence in Paris that they are good before. You should expect them to be good. And like this is like they have like super high expectations are, I think, justified for sure.
Nice. So, if you're feeling brave, how do you think we stack up, first impressions against a team like this?
Oh, I think we can win.
Really?
I think we can win.
That's confidence.
Well, I mean, we have a good roster as well. That's the thing. Like, we need. So we're gonna start screaming soon, but we need to get like this synergy going as well. Obviously, Dallas Fuel already has it, but in terms of pure talent, I think we can for sure go head to head against them.
Nice. I mean, I think fans have a lot to look forward to opening weekend for us. You know, it should be a fun match, and you know, especially for someone like Soon playing against his former teammates, like they pointed out in the chat. That should be a really fun match to watch.
For sure.
All right, we're going to move into week 3, where we're going to be playing against the Washington Justice. Now, the Justice's big moves this season included picking up Fury and Mag, who was a huge main tank in Overwatch Contenders. They kept Decay. I mean, does this roster look to you guys like it's going to be a stronger squad or a weaker squad than what they finished last season with? Did they trend up or down during the offseason?
Much stronger.
Really?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I would say much
mean,
stronger as well.
I mean, they did make a run towards the end, obviously in the playoffs, but even then, I think that was very meta dependent for them because they were able to, you know, run Decay on Zarya, and I think their front line had a lot of issues, and they replaced that front line with, you know, a world-class off tank in Fury, who's a world champion. They replaced him with Mag, who is, you know, there's always like 1 or 2 guys who are kind of the big prizes of free agency every year, or like the free agent market in the off season, and Mag was the guy. So, you know, they upgraded massively there. They still kept Decay. They added nice pieces around it. They have so much DPS depth as well. You know, they've kind of checked all of the boxes. So, you know, the expectations are rightfully very high.
Right. Well, again, we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the Justice because we'll play them again. So we'll revisit them later in the season as well. For week 3, we're also going to be playing against the London Spitfire. Again, this is another team like the Dallas Fuel that got a complete reset this offseason. But the difference is fans aren't slating them to do quite as well as the Fuel. You know, in some media this offseason, the London Spitfire essentially told fans, be patient with us. You know, this is kind of a building year. You know, don't expect us to be world beaters just yet. But Mineral, this is a question for you because their new general manager, Nuki, has been in the competitive Overwatch scene for a long time now. So I'm guessing you're probably familiar with her, yeah?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Now, does seeing this rebuild in her hands instill like confidence in you that it can succeed, or do you look at the players and still feel a little bit hesitant?
Well, it's a tough hand to be dealt, right? Because they transitioned from a full Korean roster to a fully Western roster. Anytime you make that transition and you're not keeping any of your players, it's usually going to be very difficult to make that transition and immediately be good, right? Like really good, be a world beater team. It's easier to go in the other direction, just because of the amount of talent there is in Korea. But doing it this way, it's always going to be, I think, a little bit harder. You know, that being said, you know, they did have a very strong academy team that, you know, won everything in Europe, so they have a lot of synergy to kind of just heading into the season. I'd say the Shax pickup, kind of the Valiant imploding and Shax becoming available, and the Spitfire team signing him was huge because I think with Sparker becoming eligible for Overwatch League play, I think it was like mid-June.
It's in like June, yeah.
Yeah, I think they would have had a pretty big hole there, and Shax is, you know, a superstar.
Definitely.
Yeah, is a superstar player, is a superstar tracer player, very serviceable on pretty much all of the hit scans. We've seen him pop off multiple times, so I think that pickup was huge. Obviously, still some question marks with some rookies, some older veterans coming in. You know, I do think it's a solid roster, but naturally, I think it is hard to just kind of, you know, full roster overhaul, go Western, and then because really, I think to have a championship contending Western roster, you really need like these special pieces, and there's not really that many, you know, around the league. You know, the supers, the spaces of the world. There's not that many of them. So,
can you talk a little bit more about what that Shax pickup means for them? Because I think that was like kind of a turning point for a lot of fans as well.
Sure, I think especially, I mean, Sparker, I would have said would have been the designated tracer player, and I think between Blase and Hybrid, I'm not sure like if I would have been super confident that they would have a tracer that would hold up. I think most of the rosters in the league, they have a really strong tracer player, and for at least a couple of months, I feel like they would have lacked there. And if they run into a tracer meta, I think they would have been a lot of problem. And all of a sudden, they have a top 5 tracer. So like they kind of tick that box that I think would have been pretty rough to fill. And now they have 3 active DPS and Sparker coming in later. So yeah, I think it's a big fill for them.
Well, if we can, let's talk a little bit about Scrimbucks here for a second.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the teams that I know we've scrimmed against a little bit. So not that
Yep.
we're gonna, pull a whole ton from this because a lot can change in the next 2 months. But how do you feel like we stack up in some of our early scrims?
Pretty good. Better than expected. To put things in their context as well, it was a scrim team, so it wasn't like the full roster. We couldn't scrim like Korean and Europeans together due to ping.
Right.
So we had to pick up. So we had ColorX, Soon, and Fusion. Punk couldn't play obviously because he was still in Australia. So we had to pick up like subs. So of course synergy and level of play wasn't at the level that it could be if we were full team. But even then, we pick up some really good contenders players like Guidro, for instance, and we went like evenly, or we were doing good against them. It was also the beginning for them, so it's Scrimbucks, but like at the very beginning of the season when people are building synergy still, even though they have a good basis, they still have like even if you change one player in a team, you can change a lot of stuff. So
Right.
it doesn't, as you're saying, it doesn't mean much, but we are doing pretty good with this Scrim team, much better than expected, I think. Players were really looking forward to play and everything, so they had a lot of motivation.
Right. And of course, we'll be able to have most of the full, non-ping team together coming in the coming weeks. So hopefully we get some more Scrimbucks soon. So we're gonna, after we play the Spitfire, hopefully we'll be qualifying for the first tournament of the season. But this is something else that I think people noticed immediately when we posted our schedule was you look at these first 4 matches and it looks like an absolute gauntlet to start the season. I mean, you've got the Gladiators, you've got the Fuel, you've got the Justice, and if they play their cards right, again, like you said, depending on what the meta is, maybe Shax pops off for the Spitfire, and you could have 4 really, really tough matches. How do you come into the season preparing to face like an immediately difficult schedule? Like, does it look as daunting to you as it does to fans? Kind of how do you approach that?
It looks pretty scary, to be honest. Not scary, but it looks challenging because, like you said, I think they are the teams who've made maybe half their team have been swapped out, or like their full team with the Dallas. And I think those are the teams expected to do really well. Gladiators, Dallas, and Washington. People are rating them really high. And so I think preparing for it, we've just got to, keep our head down and, go to work. And that's why I think having that bye in week 1 is pretty decent because we get to kind of grasp like the league and the different teams. And so I think it's going to be good to watch. But yeah, other than that, we just have to, get down to practice and try and come out swinging.
I think you make a good point too, though, because if you were coming into this and it was week 1 and you had no tape on these guys, maybe it would be tougher. But week 2, maybe it's not as difficult or as challenging.
Yeah.
So
give us more time to practice as well.
Well, that too, because you'll have more times to deal with like the metas and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, so it's not all doom and gloom. Like it looks like a tough schedule, but there are some upsides to the way that ours, our season starts.
Yeah. Personally, I'm looking forward to it. I think we have a good team this year. We have enough time, I think, to build synergy. There are a lot, like this season specifically. I think there are a lot of good teams. Like obviously, in the perfect world, you want to go against like the lower tier teams first, and then as like the synergy builds up, you want to go against better and better team, but that's unrealistic. I think we have enough time to practice and build synergy and be a good team by the time we face Gladiators. So I'm looking forward to it personally. Like these are the kind of teams that I want to beat against. So
right. I think early on in the season, it gives you a pretty good idea of where you're at and where you can go from there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it is like very front loaded. I think even if you look at stage 2, you have I don't know we're gonna get there, but that's also a relatively tough stage, right. And our schedule is pretty front loaded. But I feel like if we can kind of keep up and do well in those first 2 stages, we have a lot more potential in stage 3 and 4 to really capture some momentum and heading into the playoffs kind of hit our peak. Whereas I think sometimes maybe you start with a softer scale. We've seen this with teams, right? We've seen, I remember Toronto in season 2, they came in, they won like 6-1 in stage in the first stage, and then they won like 2 games for the rest of the season, right? And that was a case of like they had a really light schedule in the beginning, and then like doom and gloom for the rest of the year. So I think having it like this, it isn't necessarily all doom and gloom, because let's see how we do, and then worst case, like heading into the second part of the year, we can capture some momentum and peak at the right time, which is really we want to make the playoffs, we want to do well in the playoffs. So that's another way to look at it, I think.
Well, I would imagine too, aside from just the match results, it probably has something to do with the mental as well, because let's pretend you win most of your games in the first half of the season, lose a lot, and then qualify for playoffs, you probably feel kind of down. Whereas if it's the other way around, where we're getting really good, and then you qualify for playoffs, you probably feel a little better.
Yeah, or for example, like if you lose a lot and then you look at the schedule and your next game, when you're a 3-game skid and your next game is Washington, you're like, oh, that's going to be a rough one for the mental, Whereas on the flip side, you have a competitive game against Washington heading into a game with like a London or a Paris or someone who's like at least in the early power ranking seems a little lower down, or like a softer matchup, you'd have a lot more confidence heading into that game because of how well you did against a tougher opponent. So,
right. Well, we're going to go ahead and dig into the second quarter of the schedule. Just a reminder for those of you in the chat, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in. I'm keeping an eye on chat. So if you have anything that I'm not asking that you want to see about these teams that we're playing, drop it in the chat. I'll do my best to get to some of them as we keep going. Week 5 is a bye. We go into second quarter of the schedule where we play Toronto Defiant in week 6. So the Defiant are a team that have completely changed their roster every year, basically. Their staff and their roster gets blown up, brought in new people. They went most of 2020 without an official head coach, and now they have an entirely new coaching staff with KDG at the helm coming over from the Fusion. Of course, part of their rebuild is how we were able to grab assistant coach Baroy this offseason. He was kind of an instrumental guy during their offseason, from what I understand. Do you think it was a mistake for them to let him go? Or do you think it was kind of necessary for them to just start over completely fresh and without him?
Well, I think it was definitely kind of wrong to release him at the time when they did. Thankfully, we hadn't kind of filled that position yet. But needless to say, like he got those news very, very late. I think ultimately it just comes down to kind of what the head coach wants and who he wants around him. They brought in KDG, obviously, and anytime you have a new coach, he has to find the coaches that he feels comfortable working with, and they do have a ton of Korean players on that roster, so presumably he wanted a more Korean presence in the coaching staff to support those guys and have enough coaching resources for everyone. So I do think it was a little bit late. He should have gotten that decision earlier if that was always in their plans. I don't know if it was, but ultimately we're happy that he became available and join our team. So
nice. So then we take a look at their roster. They started 2018 Korean. They went mixed midseason, back to Western for 2019. That's kind of where Logix came in. Now they're back to mostly Korean again. Do you think someone like Logix and then Beast alongside him sees playtime in this current, mostly Korean lineup? Or do they feel like they're just kind of filling roster spots?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of experience being a part of similar rosters, right? Like starting season 2 with Florida Mayhem, we had a similar roster makeup where we're fielding kind of one Western starter in Tvik and 5 Korean players, and needless to say, it's very, very difficult to integrate those players when there's just like one singular Western player. I do think Logix brings a lot to the table in terms of his tracer play, especially. He fills some holes. And
when you say that as someone who's worked with him too, right?
Exactly, yeah. But I do think it's going to be difficult. The fact that they have three Korean coaches. Granted, KDG speaks English very well. It might be a little bit difficult to implement him, or he's going to have to just adapt to that situation. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But it certainly is difficult for that singular player on all fronts. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got one last question on the Defiant before we move along. Not that we should always trust the Reddit hive mind, but a lot of the fans' power rankings on the Overwatch League subreddit put us like literally right next to the Defiant. How do you think we stack up against them? If we were to head-to-head now, how do you think we stack up against Toronto?
It's definitely reasonable, I think, to have like it's keeping a little bit some of the players that were there before, and like new players that are talented. I think like probably that's how people view us as well, even though we have like a bigger core and a different story as well. But like there is the same idea of like good head coach, good coaching staff, good players, but they need to build up synergy, right? So I think it's definitely going to be a good match. It will be about, I think, talent-wise, it can go really even. So we'll have to. It's gonna come down to which team builds the most synergy, basically.
I mean,
Or
that feels
strategy
like
or that kind of stuff, for sure.
Yeah, that feels like a lot, especially in the beginning of the season. You know, that's going to be the make or break component of a lot of these matches, from what it sounds like.
Yeah. I think definitely for like the teams like that, obviously I think like a team like Element, the new Element Mystic doesn't have that much of a problem with building synergy. But
Right.
for a lot of teams like us, this is like you have to get going at the start of the season. Like there's going to be a lot of work about, well, if they play with Westerners as well in their roster, I mean, if they're in their like final roster, for sure, like building synergy, having the Korean get used to speaking English, and like having everybody on the same mindset about how to play the game and everything. That's like you need hard work from the beginning. It's important to have good basis to build upon.
Right, of course. Well, after we play the Defiant, we get a little bit of wait. I take that back. We don't get a bye week. We play the Justice, and then we get a bye week. So we'll talk about the Justice again. And the elephant in the room is, as we said earlier, Jerry. After we parted ways with Jerry in the offseason, it was just a couple days later he signed with the Justice. And I have no doubt in my mind that the production at the Overwatch League is going to make Boston versus Jerry the storyline for these matches. But do you think, Punk, that Jerry even sees playtime with 4 DPS on their roster? Or do you think he's going to be kind of a starter, bench, meta-dependent? What's the deal there?
I think he'll see some playtime at some points, but obviously it's hard to go past. Obviously, Decay, I think, is going to start the whole time.
Right.
No, regardless of whatever the meta is, because he can play a lot of heroes and everything up to like the top level. I've heard a lot that Tuba's gotten really good and he's like improving heaps. I think Assassin's also really good coming out of Korean contenders. So I think it might be hard for Jerry to see playtime, but he definitely will at some point. I hope he plays against us because I really want to beat him. So
yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. Is like when you're playing against former teammates. What does that feel like? I'm sure you've done this in the past, like playing against former contenders' teammates.
yeah, it's just that extra something within you that's just like I really want to beat you specifically because I know that like
not your team, just you.
Yeah. It's something about it. It's personal, right? Like because obviously we spent a lot of time together last year. I think we're good friends now, but I know how he acts. I know like how he plays. So I think it gets a bit personal, and I really want to beat Jerry when he's playing against us.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on the kill feed, and
Yeah.
hopefully things go our way in those matches.
Definitely.
So I'm going to take a look at a couple questions from chat. Some of them are coming our way for the social stuff. Captain McSchmack asks, can we expect to keep hearing from players and coaches throughout the season? That's the plan. We're still working on this kind of stuff. It's still preseason, but fingers crossed. Is Boston living in one team house or a bunch of apartments, asks BK. Apartments, but Mineral, you can probably talk a little bit more about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to add really. I think the biggest difference is that we've moved all of our staff and our players to apartments. Everyone has their own room, their own bathroom, just to make sure that everyone's comfortable. We also, obviously, during COVID, we want to kind of limit the amount of travel we do. We don't want to go to the facility every day. We're still probably going to utilize it because we have a nice facility, but we also want to have the option of kind of work from home. But at the same time, we want that kind of personal connection with the players. I think when players all stay in the rooms during reviews, it's very difficult. We had that kind of chasm last year where our staff were in apartments, our players were in a gaming house, and then when we're doing reviews, you can't really keep an eye on the players the same way you can when you're close to them. So now everyone's part of living in the same apartment complex. We've also gotten another big apartment where we can practice, kind of a mini training facility, if you will, where we have all of our setup, PCs, everything. So we have almost like 2 facilities this year. So we can pick and choose when we want to practice from home, when we want to go to the facility. But both places will be fully equipped to make sure that we're staying safe, and we have choices, and we can keep an eye on the players to make sure that we don't drift apart from each other as the season progresses. So
right, that flexibility. I mean, I haven't visited quite yet, but that flexibility sounds really nice to be able to, if you want to hang out in your guys' rooms and chill out together, you can. If you want your alone time, you can do that too. So it sounds like you guys really have the setup this year. Jurian asks, are you guys playing matches from the facility? I don't know if we have decided that yet or not.
I don't know if there's a final decision on that, but it's relatively likely that we will. Obviously, when you are living in a house or in apartments, we saw it a couple of times last year with other teams, right, where you would lose electricity. I think it was in one of our matches, right, or the internet would be bad.
It was like a Toronto match. I think they had to sub Roki in.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, needless to say, at our facility at Patriots Place, the internet is, even though we have excellent internet here at the apartments as well, everything is just a little bit safer.
It's business grade.
Exactly. So, it's pretty likely that we will play our official matches from the facility.
I would put the asterisk on that it also probably depends on how COVID evolves as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah. But that's the hope anyway.
Yeah. Either way, we have the choice. Whether it's wherever we want to do it, we have the choice.
Backup plans in any situation is always good.
Yep.
So after this week 7 bye, we're going to be playing week 8 against the Paris Eternal. Now, like the Dallas Fuel, this is another complete roster overhaul. And I know that Paris fans were pretty disappointed to see the 2020 roster split up. I mean, he came top 4 NA and then blow the team up. I know that's a bit unfortunate for the French fans, but we're pretty happy to have Soon here as a result. Ascoft, you played a little bit of a role in getting Soon here in the offseason. Can you talk a bit more about Soon and how that came to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it helped a little bit to be able to talk in French with Soon. It's not like we were like super close. Like we knew each other by names, like we'd been around and everything. But I've helped make him understand what the Boston project was. But it's not like I was like the main part of why he wanted to join, right? Like what he really liked was like the project that Boston brings. It's really similar to the one that Paris did successfully last year with like merging Westerners and Koreans from the same team together with like a head coach who's Korean. So we really, really liked that from Paris last year. And like one thing that was super important as well was like the living conditions. I mean, I'm expected, I think, here to say a good thing about Boston, but I mean it. Like, I think in terms of living condition, Boston is pretty top tier in the league. And like, Soon is a veteran, like he's 26, maybe 20, I think he's 27 recently.
Like 27, I think.
Yeah. So he wants good living condition, right? He wants his own room. He wants his like good quality of life. That things are taken care of for him and everything. So he has that with Boston, plus the fact that the roster was looking very, very promising. Soon, I think, had different offers as well, but he preferred to join us for these reasons, for sure.
And I know Soon and I chatted about that when we were doing the r/Overwatch University AMA that we did a couple weeks ago. So if anyone out there wants to hear from Soon what he had to say about that, he had a couple responses in that thread as well. So you can take a look at that on Overwatch University subreddit. But Ascoft, being from France, I think you probably have a better take than I do about how French fans are feeling about this new Paris roster. What's kind of the sentiment that they have about this new 2021 squad?
Oh, I think pretty much everyone is disappointed. I feel bad to say that because like there are a lot of players. I kind of like the Paris roster. I like the fact that they're going EU at least. It's just that I love the project of the last year so much. Like the fact that they successfully and proved that the combination of Westerners players and Korean players could work at like a really high level. Obviously, that's what we want to do as well with Boston. So like and I really like that as well because it was like French and Koreans. A lot of fans got really attached emotionally to the Korean players and everything. So I think everybody was pretty demoralized when you do such a good season that the whole team gets disbanded for the reason that we know. I think pretty much everybody fell down. But I mean,
When
it's life.
like you said,
That's
you
good
kind
for
of
us.
to,
We get soon, and we get a good part of the player base, the fan base. I mean, so not
and
gonna
I mean,
complain.
you also have to separate.
Thank you, Paris.
Thank you, Paris. Yeah, we'll send him a postcard. But you kind of have to separate what happened from this new roster that comes in. So, what are your thoughts on these new, this new European
new
roster?
players? Yeah. As I said, I like it. I think it's definitely not going to be top tier. Like, we cannot expect them to be top tier now. In terms of talent, there are a few players that I like. Like the flex support is really, really good. He's coming from contenders, but like he's actually insane mechanically. Always been a big fan of Elivot as well. I know Tsuna, who's French and like really, really good tracer. I think Gedemez as a head coach can be good. It's going to be a lot of weight on his shoulders because it's his first time coaching as a head coach and in Overwatch League, but I think he's good at like motivating players and everything. So there is potential for them to be better than what people expect, which is probably like very bottom of the rankings right now.
Okay. Well, again, we're just gonna have to kind of wait and see how that pans out for them. That same week that we play Paris, we'll also be playing against the Los Angeles Gladiators. This is the second team in 2021 after the Justice that we'll be playing twice. From a planning perspective, what do how do you approach the second time that you play against a team? After you've played with them once, you have a few weeks off, you can look at the footage, you can see how they adapt. How do you approach a team that you have to play twice?
I think it depends as well. Obviously, what the either hero pool or the meta will be at the time, because it may differ, and so you can't exactly watch the same tape and then make strategy and fix specific gameplay things for the second match. But I think you'll know what to expect. Obviously, you'll have the result of the first match kind of lingering in your mind, and either know, okay, this was a tough game before, but we convincingly beat them or something, or like we stomped them or they stomped us. So you'll kind of know what to expect in terms of their level, but I think that gives you a chance to maybe come up with specific things to beat them, like specific niche strats that you ever use once, but it might just win you a game. So yeah, I think those are the things that that might occur preparing for like a team that you verse the second time.
Right. So it's not so simple, cut and dry. It's just like, okay, here's.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, and yeah, especially because one of these is with hero pools and one is without, so it's going to be a little complicated. But before we go into our intermission, at this point, we've gone through half of our season. Again, hopefully after these 4 matches in kind of stage 2, we'll be looking at the playoffs. Fingers crossed. But we are going to be going into the intermission here, but I'm going to take a couple more questions from chat before we do so. Valde and Gruo asks, I think this one is probably best suited for Mineral. Is the plan to go with just Faith and Myeonbong for supports? And what's the contingency plan if one gets sick or needs a surgery like Axiom?
I'll play.
Exactly, we have Ascoft.
Yeah, we have Big Lucio, contenders champion.
Yep.
Well, but you always have to think about that when you're building a roster, right? Where you're gonna have depth, and it is when you're building a team, you're always most teams are operating under a budget, right? And you have to figure out where you want to add like a star player, where you want to add depth. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense to add more depth to your roster because anytime you add a player, when that player doesn't play, he's going to be upset. And if that player isn't good enough to really put the pressure on the starter, then you end up with like kind of dead weight on the roster, right? And I think we've seen multiple teams in the league take this approach where they're really confident in the player that they have in a certain position, where they'd rather invest a lot of money into getting a quality starter rather than adding depth. I think Florida is a perfect example of that, where they only they shaved off a lot of players off that roster, and they just kind of have a really solid start in every position and a little bit of depth in DPS. Even the Gladiators that we talked about earlier, looking at their depth chart, they have depth in every position, but at tanks they only have Muse in space. Ultimately, I think it comes down to the fact that we really believe in Myeonbong and Faith to flex to play most heroes. We believe that Faith can also pick up some of the flex supports if needed, and double flex support metas, and we chose to add depth in other positions like DPS. Right, we have 4 players there. No matter what the meta is, we have enough depth there. We really kind of struggled last year when we lost one of our DPS players, and we only had 2 for the rest of the year. Bad meta rolls around, and we're really going to struggle. So, this year, that's where we have our depth. I think, worst comes to worst, we do have 4 DPS players. DPS players are generally very mechanically gifted. So, if emergency strikes, I'm sure one of them could, step up to the plate and play a little bit. I know, for instance, Color Hex has played quite a bit of flex support. In ranked, I've seen him flex around. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. We believe in the roster we have and the guys that we have, but ultimately we had to kind of pick and choose where we want to have our depth, and DPS was where we really felt like we needed that. So.
Yep. Right. And I think we'll see this as we look, at some of these rosters later. But like you said, a lot of these teams have some place where they don't have that depth, and it's just kind of where are you going to do that at? Because nobody, you're not going to have a 12-man roster unless you're the Shock. But you're going to have to, forego that in some place. So I think the explanation makes sense. And I think a lot of people forget too, like these are 4.6 players, 4.7 players in some instances. Like, it's not only one role that they know how to play. So like you said, someone like Color Hex could flex if need be. One more question from chat before we go to the break. I had it. Chat scrolled and now it's gone. Uh-oh, this is awkward. Ascoft, there it is. Trevor asks, what made you go from being a player and a player manager into from being a pro player into a coach/manager?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, so it's not manager. I'm actually coaching. Ideally, I prefer, but I'm gonna have to do macros. But ideally, I prefer to do the individual and development of the players and everything. But so I've been a professional player in Europe in 2019, for 2 years. It was always a plan for me to start pro and then swap to coach. I didn't go pro with the ambition of being the best player. I wanted to be part of a good team and compete at a very good level. I wanted to prove to myself that I could be a good player and a professional player, but I always wanted to move to a coaching position. So it was pretty natural to me. I like leading my team to the right direction. I like all of the synergy stuff that we could have talked about, that we talked about already, Matt, on the superb article that you have written.
Thank you.
So it was just a natural step for me. It was thought of and thought about before. And so I've played, I won contenders. I went to Gauntlet. It didn't go that well, but whatever. And then I went to coaching, but it's more or less the same. What I'm doing as a player is more or less the same what I'm doing as a coach right now. I'm just trying to add depth to what I can bring to a team now in terms of mental coaching or that kind of stuff.
Nice. Well, I know we're glad to have you here and finally have you here in Boston.
Thank you.
So that's nice. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and throw it to a quick little intermission. Go stretch your legs, grab some water. Carrie will be back in just a moment to talk about some of our giveaways that we have. And I believe we're going to be showing off our top 5 fan highlights. You guys saw earlier this week, we asked you to submit your best Overwatch plays. We took our 5 favorites and we put them into a little highlight reel for you. So stick around. That's coming up in just a minute. And let me tell you, this number 1 play is going to blow your mind. It's something. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and throw it to a break and we'll be right back in a minute.
Hey guys, so those were some awesome highlights submitted by you guys. So thank you again for entering your highlights, and hopefully you guys made it and were able to see your plays. If you missed me at the beginning, my name is Carrie. I'm part of the content team here at the Uprising, and I'm just going to be taking a couple minutes to announce some of the giveaways that we'll be doing. At the beginning of the show, I did announce that we are doing a raffle for 1,000 Overwatch League PC tokens, and all you have to do to enter is be watching. So as long as you're watching right now, you do have a chance. I'm actually going to choose a winner now. Hopefully this works. But yeah, so this basically will just be picking a winner at random, and it looks like the winner is Osiren. Congratulations. You just won 1,000 Overwatch League PC tokens, and basically all you need to do to claim them is really quick take a screenshot of your entire chat so we can see both where you would like say something and also the one that says that you're the winner. And basically so we can like match those two icons and verify that it's you. And then basically all you have to do is just DM us on Twitter, and we'll be able to get that code to you for 1,000 tokens. So congratulations again to Osiren. I see you in chat. Hi. And basically, if you didn't win the raffle, guys, don't worry, because we do have another giveaway, which is going to be for a 2021 Uprising jersey. And basically, what you need to do is follow this link that will show up as soon as I type this command in here. Basically, that should pop up a link. There we go. Basically follow that. That's going to be the entry form. Basically, you just need to fill that out. That command is live for the rest of the stream. So anytime, if you don't see it now, you can always just type in !commands for all of them, or just !jersey to get that link up for you to enter. So just follow that link, fill it out. You'll be entered. That winner will be contacted at a later date. But you do have the whole second half of the stream to enter for that, and that is a 2021 season Uprising jersey. It's blank, but you do get to choose whether you want the home colors or away colors. So that is a super awesome deal. So be sure you guys enter that one as well. That's pretty much all from me. Again, just type in commands for all of the commands that we have for this live stream. Basically, everything is under there. I wanted to quickly plug our socials just to make sure that you guys are following us on all of our channels, because that is obviously where we're going to be doing most of our updates. Anything like this kind of live stream or any kind of giveaways, most of our stuff is going to be on there. So follow us everywhere. I personally am on TikTok a lot, so I would love to see more of you guys there. I love interacting with you guys on that platform. But again, it's been super awesome to be here with you guys today. I'm looking forward to all of you entering the jersey giveaway, and congratulations again to Osiren. That's basically it. I'm going to throw it back to Matt, actually, so you guys can get the rundown on the entire second half of our schedule. But again, thanks again. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show. Bye.
Hello, everyone. And what'd you think of that top play, huh? That Diva bomb into the hook. Classic. Absolutely classic. So we've got another 30 or 45 minutes for you. If we have some time at the end, we'll be taking a few more of your questions. But right now, we're going to jump into the third set of matches. Tournament 3, we're going to be starting out playing against the Vancouver Titans. This is going to be week 11. The Titans had a very tumultuous 2020 season. Let's just say there's a reason we used the movie Titanic in our reveal today. Check that out on Twitter. Anyway, they completely overhauled their roster halfway through the season, and from the outside, that looked like a mad scramble to put a team together in a very short amount of time. But they did end up keeping 3 out of those 7 players who were part of that kind of rushed rebuild. Mineral, as a manager, what do you think about those decisions on, who to grab mid-season, who to keep in the off-season, and kind of how they're building more sustainably for 2021? What's your take on that roster?
I wouldn't be too confident. I'm not going to lie. I think looking at the players that actually left after the season, I think Shockwave and KSA were two players that Shockwave undeniably was kind of the star player. I think he was a free agent, so you just, Philly came knocking. Obviously, he's going to choose to go to the Fusion, being kind of an upper tier team. KSA, I was a little surprised that they released, but perhaps there's some issues there in terms of visas. Who knows? I do think they might still struggle this year. There are some interesting pieces on the team for sure. Linkster gets another shot here with a different team. I think Teru is a pretty decent player from what I've seen. You have Dalton, who I think, especially on Tracer, can do a lot of damage. I think he showed that last year. I think it was kind of the Shockwave and Dalton show. I think when they won games, when they did well, I think it was kind of off the back of those two players most of the time. So I think their DPS are going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting this year as well. Especially with Shockwave not on this team. It's some big shoes to fill, I think. So.
Right. So yeah, you're kind of getting to my next question, which is, I know fan expectations are kind of low for the Titans this year. I've seen a lot of these tier lists that are putting them at 10 through 12 in NA plus EU. It's a 7-player roster, and at that, it kind of has a lot of these unproven names. We were talking earlier about teams that don't have a lot of depth, and this is really one of them. If you had, a Justice starting 6, maybe we wouldn't feel this way. But when it's only 7 people, does this roster look weak?
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it nicely,
Yeah, definitely. Yes, on paper, yes. I'm always worried about ranking teams before seeing them play, because there is so much stuff that can happen. Yes, it's a 7-man roster. If they click together, and especially because they're in a position, because nobody expects them to perform, right? The underdog mentality can help a team improve and actually perform in official so much. I think we've experienced it a little bit last season as well. So you can expect them to be, I think it's reasonable to expect them to be bottom tier. But for us as a team and as coaching staff, I wouldn't be too cocky saying we 100% beat these guys. I want to see them play and everything.
It's kind of that line between cocky but confident. You don't want to be too much.
Confident, definitely, yeah. But you have a good point. Cocky.
When I think, like you said, you don't want to take, you don't want to go too far until you've seen them in action. I think Season 1 Boston was especially that team where, when the Overwatch League was starting and people didn't know where to rank a lot of players. People put Boston at 12 out of 12 that season, and then had to eat their words when Boston came third. So you never really want to, go too heavily into beating up on a team before you see them. So moving on from the Titans, this is another team that we'll talk about later because we play them, I believe, the last week of our regular season. So we'll talk about them a little bit more in a bit. Week 11, we're also playing against the Mayhem. The Mayhem and the Uprising had very different 2020 seasons. One kind of, the Mayhem did pretty well for themselves throughout the season. Even though we had very different years, we approached the offseason, it seems to me, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm a social media manager, but I feel like we approached it in very similar ways, right? Identify and keep the pieces that fit. So for us, that meant Fusions, Color Hex, Punk, obviously, and Yunbong. And you kind of build upon that base with some new signings. Mineral, you and the Mayhem organization go way back, and a lot has changed since you two parted ways. But one thing that hasn't is their general manager, Albert. Now that you're kind of in a management role and can kind of see things through similar eyes, I want to get your take on how you think that Albert and the Mayhem have been building this roster for 2021.
Yeah, since I left, actually, Albert even changed positions. While I was still a head coach over there, he was kind of the head of the academy there, and then kind of got promoted up all the way. I think Albert's done a great job. I think he understands the game very well. He plays the game still. I think out of all the general managers, probably the one that plays Overwatch the most. Huck is obviously, he's
Huck is in the chat.
He's up there threatening in GMs. We did play a couple of duo games with Chris actually, so he's still got it. But I think Albert has a great vision. I think he is very conscious of everything. They've had the rebrand since he took over at the helm. They picked up that runaway package that proved really fruitful last year with Kuki, with Yaki and Gangnajin coming in, and this year I think they just like he said himself, he chose to use his budget in a way where he went for a really solid starter in every position, rather than having a player that doesn't really apply much pressure to the starter and doesn't really play throughout the year. So it's clear that they want to just have a very solid starting lineup, and they do. I think they also have a ton of depth at DPS. Yaki I think is an MVP candidate. BKB, he's someone that we scouted while I was still there, and we had really high hopes for him, and I'm super happy that he's done as well as he's done. He's an exceptional player and really great player and guy to work with as well. I think the biggest question mark that I have, I think they've upgraded kind of at main support as well. They're bringing in Slime. The biggest question mark I think for this team is just the main tank position, because I rate Fate as one of the best main tanks in the league. I think he brings a huge leadership element, and I think probably Albert would agree that kind of the biggest question mark is like, can OG fill those shoes as consistently as Fate has been a rock for the last 3 seasons wherever he's been. Can OG be that for the Mayhem? You can argue this is the best environment yet for OG to actually do that. Like, everything's super solid around him. It's just like on him to really perform. But those are some pretty darn big shoes to fill. So I think we'll see how that works out. And if that works out well, I think they can have a very high ceiling. But regardless, with this roster, I think they have a pretty high floor as well, where I think they can beat up on a lot of teams just through raw talent.
Yeah, I know you're not alone in that feeling when it comes to OG. Watching the Plat Chat podcast, they were saying the same sort of thing. Is you have this very stable core around him. Can he just kind of slot in and do better than he's done in the past? Again, time will tell. We'll play them twice, so we'll be talking about them again later in the show. Week 12, we'll be having a bye week, but when we come back week 13, we're going to be playing against the Houston Outlaws. Again, another team that's been making some big adjustments this offseason. Big surprise last month was the news that Jake is returning as a rostered player, but also is going to have some coaching duties. Ascoft, you talked about it a little bit earlier that even when you were a player on HSL Esports, you were kind of doing a lot of what you're doing now as a coach. Tell us what it's like to have both responsibilities at the same time. Is that a lot to handle?
Yes and no. It's like pros and cons, I think, but it probably has more pros for sure. It's a bit different because they actually have a coaching staff. While in HSL we had no coaching staff, it was like mainly Fisher being the team captain and everybody was participating, myself included. But definitely it's a good thing. I think it allows you to, when you have like this responsibility of like having to coach the team and having to figure out the solution, it forces you to look at the bigger pictures. Not only what you need to do as like an individual in the game, but like what the whole team has to do, what your teammate has to do, does it synchronize with everything? And when you do that and you put extra time into like analyzing the game and from like from the bigger picture, not only you build much more game sense. Like that's definitely a good thing. The bad thing, at least for me, but that's also who I was a player, I was tending to focus too much on what was happening on the macro and not enough on what I was actually doing in game. So I ended up dying a bit too much, just looking and trying to communicate about what should we do next and everything and not focusing on myself. So pros and cons, but definitely it's good. I don't know how much they actually plan to use Jake as a player, but...
Well, that was going to be my next question is, do you think he really plays a lot or is it just kind of...
I honestly don't know. I would assume not, maybe for like a few specific stuff or maybe to lock the Junkrat or who knows. But
play him on Junkrat and Lijiang, Control Center, White Room.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, the classic.
Yeah.
But it has benefits for sure. Especially in a team where there is a coaching staff so that he can be the link between the coaching staff and the players. I think it's a great move.
Nice. Well, Mineral, I've got a question for you when we talk about this roster as well. Some leaks in the offseason indicated that there were a couple of players that they were so close to signing, and then those guys got swooped up by other teams. I know the big one was Nero to the Shock. He was apparently supposed to go to Houston and then didn't. Have you ever been in a position, either as a manager or as a coach, where you really, really wanted to add a player to the team and then they get swooped up by somebody else? What do you do in that position? And do you have like a plan A, B, C what happens?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think you have to have that. I think obviously it really depends on the team. I think different teams play by different rules. A team like the Shock, right, heading into this type of off season where they've won back-to-back championships, they've said it publicly themselves, like they weren't the highest paying team in the league, but everyone wants to come there because of the crusty factor, because they have the championship pedigree. So if Shock wants someone, they're probably going to get them, and they're probably going to get them at at a better price, as long as the player likes their perceived role in that team, right? So, for teams that are kind of below that don't have that pedigree or those proven results, especially coming off a tough season, like we have a couple, back-to-back tough seasons, recruitment becomes, I think, a lot harder, and you have to have kind of boards like that where, well, this is our number one option. What are we willing to pay for this type of a player? If we don't get him, who's the number two option? What is the gap between the number one and the number two option? If the drop off is incredibly big, then maybe we have to just kind of, we have to go really hard for that one player. But also, what is the market for that player? That's also something we look at a lot. When we look at a free agent, okay, what does this player fill on our team? What's the gap that he fill on our team? What other gaps do other teams have where he might fill a gap as well? And that's how you kind of have to figure out whether it's even possible to sign a guy. If like Shock, Fusion, and a couple of other teams want a guy, then there's going to be a massive bidding war, probably going to one of those teams. So yeah, I think you have to have that all the time. I think Houston probably in the same boat because they came off a pretty poor season. I guess Shock came calling, and Nero obviously would choose Shock in that scenario. So yeah, I think you have to have that. You have to have as you're building up, and I think as your results get better, as your reputation gets better, you get a bigger choice in terms of who you can go out there and get. Yeah, but you have to have contingency options: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. The way you're describing it, it sounds like a very lengthy and difficult process of, like you said, you're not just thinking about what you need, you're thinking about what every other team needs.
Yeah.
And that just sounds like, I don't envy you. That's not for me. But yeah, thank you for the insight. That's really helpful because, again, I think a lot of people don't always know what goes on as far as, management and behind the scenes sort of thing. So it's really cool to hear. Moving on from Houston, we'll be playing against the Atlanta Reign in week 13 as well. This is another team like the Titans, like the Mayhem, that they've got the league minimum 7 players. In 2020, we knew what it was like to kind of whittle down slowly to 7 players, right? We had a slew of retirements early in 2020. We had Axiom's medical needs. COVID, I know, made signings a little bit difficult. Visa processing was difficult. So it's not just Atlanta looking at the 7-man roster. It's many other teams as well. From your experience in a team that ran with 7 players, what advice would you give to these guys that are running small rosters? What is it like, and how do you make the best of it? Quiet.
Was that for me or for
anyone? Go for it.
I'm trying to think about what I can. Best of luck, really, because I like the players that they got as well, but like the 7-man roster for me, from a coaching perspective, it's super hard when you don't have the flexibility to play all the metas, especially last year because the metas were shifting every week. So it was a bit of a gamble. Like, are we going to be good on this meta, or are we going to have to just tank it? It's a struggle for sure, considering how defeats affect the mental of everyone. Yeah. There is no advice about there is advice about what can you do to get away with it, but this is just not a situation that you want. You want depth in your roster, and in Overwatch, depth in for instance, the DPS role is important. So yeah, I'm not so sure. Good luck, guys.
When you talk about like you're saying, Mineral, for the Mayhem, they had this idea that we would rather just have a small but stacked roster. Kind of what was, if that's their decision, what was, how do you make that decision to have more flexibility instead?
Well, I think it's kind of, if you're not confident in one of your players being exceptional at all the potential heroes that they might play, right? If you have a player like Fate, you're pretty confident that he can play every main tank. If you have a player like LH Cloudy, you probably want a little more depth there. He's going to come in. He's going to be the best Reinhardt in the world probably, but you go into a Winston meta, and he's not going to beat the Sados of the world, right? So really, just depends on the player that you get, and the hero pool and how confident you are that they're going to flex. I think just looking at Atlanta's roster, I think I do think their front line is pretty flexible. Gator has played a lot of off tanks as well. He's one of the more flexible main tanks, I'd say, just in terms of what he can play. I still think there are some question marks on the roster in terms of certain flexibilities, but I do think they still have a lot of talent. And I think especially in the DPS position, that's where you absolutely have to have depth, and that's where they actually have their depth. Adding someone like KSP, who can be in any sniper meta, can be the best player in the server, right? And who can carry you. Edison Pelican also super talented. So I think they have depth in the right positions. They're still vulnerable. I think anytime you have a smaller roster, you're going to be more vulnerable to something happening, someone not picking up a hero fast enough. But they still have a pretty decent roster nonetheless. So, and they have some star players as well, so that's big.
Mm-hmm. Based on what you've seen of these guys, do you think that their two new pickups, being KSP/Kai and Pelican, do you think that these guys have the potential to take the reign over their gatekeeper position from last year?
I'm not sure. It's difficult to say. I do think these DPS players give them a pretty high ceiling. We even saw the Valiant off the back of KSP and Ash metas beating Shock, right? I think there was there was a week where they beat Shock. So these guys have extreme ceilings where they can just take over a game and they can cause a lot of upsets. I think because of the question marks and the depth, maybe they have a lower floor than say a Florida. But if they hit on all notes, good, right? they have a pretty decent ceiling.
Because if you look at DPS, you see Edison, Kai, Pelican. That's so I'm not a fan, obviously, of the 7-man roster, but that's still a really good lineup. And the tanks are solid, the supports are solid. It can work. It just I think it's always better to have security and to be sure that you can play every meta, right? But yeah, definitely it's still a good lineup.
So actually, talking about the meta, we have a question in chat. Sam asks, this one is for Punk. What meta do you think would be the best one if you had to play against the Reign? What meta gives you the best chance to go up against them?
The Reign?
Yeah.
Not Widow, probably.
Okay.
Because they have KS or Kai.
Not Sniper, not double Sniper.
No Widow, no Ash. It's hard to say what meta would be best for us, obviously, because we haven't started scrimming fully yet with our whole team. But yeah, I think the scariest person on that team is definitely Kai for the snipers. But I think each player on that team is good. I think they're very good. So I think Gator and Hawk are solid. Hawk's good off tank. Gator's great at the Ryan and the Orisa, but he's also done really well on Monkey. So I think it's hard to pick a weak link in that team, but it's just there's so few players that if something goes wrong, it gets a bit dicey for them. But I think for the meta, I'd just say no snipers and we'd win.
Okay. Nice. Well, again, confidence. As long as the snipers are out, we got this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys for the questions in chat. Keep them coming. I'll keep taking a look and asking as we go along. So week 14, we have the third tournament of the season. We go into a bye and then come into the final tournament cycle where we will once again play the Paris Eternal. I think when we talked about the Eternal earlier, we kind of indicated that this seems, on paper, like a little bit of a step down from that 2020 roster. I know this is one more team. We're going to talk a little bit more about Scrim Bucks that we have scrimmed against a bit in some of our early practices. Without giving away too many specific details, what's your early take on the Eternal roster?
It's a bit hard to say because they were really, so them, it's not like London. They were actually building everything up in terms of synergy. And again, we with Boston, with our Scream team, we had actually a really good team. Like we picked up really good players from contenders, so we were able to match them. So I don't want to go. The Scream went fine. Like there were no dominant team in the Scream, I think, most of the time. But it's so early. Like at this stage, like the Scream box, if they was anything in general, they don't was anything when we played Paris, because it was like the very beginning, very, very, very beginning, when you have to build absolutely everything. And we had the advantage actually of like having, for instance, like the fusions and Color X synergy that is like established already. They know each other so well. So yeah, it's not so much that we can get from this.
Okay, understandable, but had to throw it out there. So.
Yeah, for sure. I understand.
Yeah. All right. Week 16. This is going to be a big one. We're going to be playing against the San Francisco Shock as well. I think, was it you, Ascoft, who said that this was one of your matches you were looking forward to a lot? This is clearly a team that needs no introduction. 2-time winners of the league. A lot of their core has returned, and their off-season replacements are Glister, FD God, Nero. They're highly praised players. But before we talk about their 2021, let's take a step back and talk about that returning squad. Punk, you have obviously played and scrimmed against the Shock. Is there anything from last season that you recall in particular that was really, really tough to deal with when you look at these guys?
There was just no chink in the armor. Like every single player was like top 3 in their role pretty much, and I think that's really hard. Obviously, when they've been together so long, and they're all familiar with playing with each other. So I think that's one part that's really tough. But another thing is they adapt and can change, and their game plan can be formed really quickly in game. And so I think they're very fluid, and they can, like, their team all does the same thing at the same time. And I think that's like the way to play Overwatch is, as long as your team is doing the same thing at the same time, you're going to win. So I think Shock are one of the best teams to do that, and so that's why I think they have a lot of their success, and that's why it was so hard and to beat them last time. And I think that's why they won. It's just because there's no weak link, and they're just a cohesive unit together, basically.
Makes sense. Anyone listening, take that into your ranked games. Get everyone on the same page, and you win.
Good luck.
It's
Good
that
luck
easy.
with that. Yeah.
But I mean, looking at their 2021 this season here, the general manager survey that the Overwatch League put out a couple weeks ago said that I think 40% of GMs think the Shock are favorites to win it again, based on last season's performance. I mean, I think everyone expects them to be a tough team to beat again. But Ascoft, since this is a team you're looking forward to playing, do you think that this year is going to be as strong for them as the last couple?
Probably, at least we can expect it. They kept like a lot of the very, very, very good bases, as Punk was saying, and they added like just straight up talent. FD God is absolutely insane. I think he has so much potential. So I'm not saying like we're gonna beat them. It's gonna be easy. Obviously, they're like gonna be super strong, but I personally have like huge faith in like the potential that we have this season, and you have to have the mentality that you can win every match. So, and like I want the players as well, our players, to have this mentality even when we face the shock. Like we have to have the mindset of we can beat them. And I think it's super, super early to say, but I think we could potentially beat them if everything goes well for us. We'll have to see. Like, it's still a super, super strong team, but I'm super excited to play against them with our roster this season.
I think that's something else that I know when I talk to Fusions, he says the same sort of thing about whether it was last season or whether it's about the World Cups. It's whether or not on paper you might lose, you go into every single match with that mindset that you can win, and this is the one where you win. And it doesn't matter how many losses you have, because you have to stay in that mentality.
Yeah, you have to. Obviously, if you look at last season, like there were some matches, like for instance, last season when we were faced to Shock, considering everything that happened, like realistically, you could say, oh, there's no way we beat them, but that's not how you can think as a team. Like the spectators can think that, and it's normal for them, but you cannot allow yourself to think that way, even if you know that the match is going to be tough. So yeah, I agree with like Shocks are favorites. Like there is no reasons to doubt it, but we have to go and try to win against them.
Nice. I know we'll do our best as we wrap up the season. We're going to be taking a look at week 17, which is the final week of the regular season for us. We'll be playing against the Vancouver Titans. Based on your early assessments, what are some of the high points on this team? And what kinks do they need to iron out before the season starts for them to become competitive?
I think this team's a bit like, it's a bit weird to look at, especially when you see I think this is going to be Fire's like first real like team that he plays on consistently, because he was benching for Atlanta for at least like the full of last year. I think they've got a couple good players who are like standouts. I think Teru specifically. I think it was a really odd signing having just that lone Korean guy. But I definitely think that Teru's good. He was in our trials. So I know I've seen a bit of him, but I think a big thing for this team is just going to be how well they like start and kind of work together. Because obviously they're the underdog. Everyone's putting them at the lowest, so I think that gives them an advantage. Obviously, when you're the underdog, you have nothing to lose. Everyone thinks you're going to lose, and so there's literally nothing you can do but just try and prove everyone wrong. So I know these guys are going to be hungry for that, which gives them a bit of a boost. But I think it's all about just the execution for these guys and the fundamentals.
Well, another question for you, since when we were talking about Atlanta, you talked about how you don't want to play against, really strong snipers. This kind of feels like an interesting season for Linkser, because he kind of only popped off really in like the Widowmaker tournament, had a kind of rough season last year. Do you think this is an opportunity for him to kind of revitalize in 2021?
Yeah, I think realistically, this is kind of Lynx's do or die team and moment. Because he's always been solid, I think, which he's been the player who's for like 4 years now, basically since the game started, he's been at the top, but never like pushing the upper echelon, the top 5 teams in the league, the top 5 players. So I think this is his chance to really prove that he's still one of the best players around. So I think he can do really well with this team there.
Right. And maybe when it comes to something like that, it's a sort of change of scenery. You're getting away from the system you've been in for a long time.
And I think a lot of the other players can learn from Linkser. Despite most of these players being pretty vetted in Overwatch and Overwatch League at least, I think he'll definitely bring a lot to the table there. So it should be good to watch.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a couple of chances to play against them, so we'll see how that goes for Linkser and for us when we play against him. For our final match of the regular season, we are going to be playing against Florida Mayhem. This will be the second time that we play them. And Mineral, let's go back to what you were talking about earlier, where OG feels like the question mark on this lineup. It's his third team. He's had an inconsistent career. Kind of like what Punk was saying about Linkser. Is this kind of his make or break season?
Yeah, I do feel like that's the case. I mean, he's been on a lot of talented rosters as well. I think even last year, Deepa's obviously done some. He's talked about this, I think, on one of his videos where he was talking like Muse versus OG, and I think what a lot of and also like a lot of people have discussed that a big issue was like the frontline synergy last year for the Gladiators. So it feels like OG has been like pointed at as kind of, granted, very talented. Everyone's seen his mechanics on stage. Has been pointed at as like, oh, didn't really work out, and the fact that he's out of the team after a season kind of signifies that. So I do think that. I think especially because most of the other pieces have stayed, right? Like your core is intact, your coaching staff is intact. The only thing that has changed is you bring in Slime over Chris, and I think maybe Slime isn't like exceptional at every single main support hero, but GOAT's meta, he was probably the best Lucio. No matter how you slice it, Slime an upgrade at main support. Everything else stays the same. How does OG compare to Fate, right? Because everyone is looking at OG, looking at his mechanics, looking at his skill. This guy needs to be one of the top 5, top 10 main tanks. And now Florida just lost probably a top 5 main tank. How does he fill those shoes? Can they hit those high ceilings? So it's going to be very interesting to see. And I do think it's a little bit of a make or break. I don't think it's make or break in terms of like, if Florida are unsuccessful this year, OG doesn't have a future or a job. I think, lower tier teams would still be an upgrade on a lot of rosters at main tank. But as far as like a top tier opportunity to be on a team that has potentially championship aspirations or can make some noise in the playoffs, I think it's a fair assessment.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a really good distinction that you make, because those teams that he's been on have been teams that are trying to be like at the top, like the Mayhem and the Fuel, the Gladiators. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, the expectation is like you go up against the Shock. Is OG going to be exposed, or is going to go toe to toe against Smurf? And
right,
because really to beat the Shock, you have to be able to match them in pretty much every position, and it's very, very difficult to do. So
yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I'm looking forward to all of these matches. I'm going to be, not biting my nails, but I will be, waiting with bated breath to see how these all turn out. But we are at the point in our show where we're at the end of the season. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here. The playoffs are still a long time away, but I think obviously every team hopes that they make the playoffs. I think that's fair to say. When we look at our roster that we've talked about, our opponents, our schedule, what do you think? Where do you think we fall? You can talk about that in terms of how many wins, whether we make playoffs or not, where we hit our stride. What's kind of your take at the end of it all?
Well, so to me, I kind of talked about it on the previous questions, but so I don't like to think about numbers. Definitely, one goal can be the playoffs for sure. With the team that we have, like we should aim for the playoffs for sure. But I think we have a strong enough team that we can go against every team with like we have to have the mindset that we're gonna win, But I realistically believe that we can win against almost all of the team, if not all of the teams. With this season, like I'm super hopeful that our Western is actually going to perform. Like I've watched every players play in the trials or like from last season. I think there is something with this year's roster that we can do. So we have to have the mindset of we can win every match. Obviously, some teams it's going to be hard because like there's like super stacked team this season. But I definitely think we can make a super good run this season.
Yeah, I think to add to that, especially counting wins, this is very difficult when we have this type of a format. A meta breaks right, you do really well in a tournament, you win a tournament, you get 3 extra points, right? 3 extra wins, and the standings can really be shaken up based on that. But just like Ascoft says, I think the big thing is we have to make sure that we're in the playoff race, and if we can make the playoffs, anything can happen. I've been saying this kind of since season 1, and it's almost been proven true every year. Like Washington had a chance at playoffs last year. They almost made it to Korea, right, from the last place because the meta broke right for them. Season 1, the bottom 2 seeds that made the playoffs were Philly and London. Both of them ended up going to the finals because the meta broke right for them. So, I feel like we need to do good enough throughout the regular season to, throw our name in the hat. Like even Seoul last year, right? Like they weren't pegged as a favorite to make it to the finals, and that you made it there. Shanghai had it on lock, but all of a sudden, last second, Seoul comes in on a good meta, put gesture on the hog, and they're in the finals. So, I think we just want to make sure that we're competitive. Every single game, we maintain a solid level of confidence, and we make the playoffs. And then meta breaks right, anything can happen. Any team can win. I think it's been proven in the Overwatch League over time. So,
what about you, Punk? Anything there?
I agree with what Ascoff said, that I think we can beat every team. I think we can go toe to toe with every team, including like the Shock and Dallas and the Gladiators and all that. So I'm gonna go into every game with that mentality, and I'm really hoping and driving for deep into the playoffs, basically, because I think it's possible. I think we've got the right tools for the job, so I think we can be able to do it.
Yeah, I know your dad, Papa Punk, is in the chat talking about how he's hoping we get some trips to Hawaii. That's an
Yes.
interesting little thing on the schedule. Yeah, are you guys? Is Hawaii in the back of your mind at any point? Like, oh, it'd be cool to get out of the snow and go to Hawaii.
Oh yes. Oh,
Well,
yes.
I've just got. I'm not used.
Yeah,
to
you
the
just
snow
got
yet.
here, so you're not tired of it
but
yet.
I would love to go to Hawaii. For all the reasons, the good reasons to go to Hawaii, and including the fact that it would mean that we'll, I think, at least up to.
It's one thing to go to Hawaii. It's another to go to Hawaii to play Overwatch. So
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. And tell me a little bit on a more serious note, like, how do you? It sounds complicated from a tech perspective of like you're going to Hawaii to play against like the Chinese and Korean teams. Like that sounds wild to me, but I think from a league perspective, it's really, really cool. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I think them implementing that is really cool. And I think it's like one of the only ways you can actually, when COVID is still rampant around the world, actually do interconference matchups. And the fact that we might have the opportunity to do that every single stage, and you might see the top teams from each region play each other, because that was the big question, like which region is better? There's two different metas in two different regions.
Yeah.
So what if they clash? Like who wins? The fact that we'll be able to hopefully answer those questions, all travel regulations permitted, I think it's awesome for the league. I was really happy to see that change, and the fact that we can kind of do it on equal footing as well, with minimum ping. It's not going to be optimal, but it's going to be as close to optimal as you can be considering the circumstances. So I'm very happy to see that.
Nice. You bring up one other question that I had is what do you think, NA versus APAC? Who's the top region this year? Obviously, it's early, but
I think APAC's really strong this time around, and they always have been. But I think, so for context as well, myself and a lot of the Koreans scrimmed with. We scrimmed together basically. So the EU part of our team scrimmed together with a bunch of subs, and we were. Boston was able to field basically 6 players from our team against other Overwatch League teams, but I just think Apex they've leveled up a bit this time around. I think they were always slightly better than NA, but I think right now and going into next year they're definitely looking really strong.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Also, I think, it's a bit complicated as well because you have really strong team in the West as well, but some of them are like entirely Korean. So, but yeah, in terms of like competitiveness, I think it's probably much harder to be in Epic than it is to be with us in the West.
Interesting. If we do end up going to be able to play against any of those APAC teams, question in chat is, what's the one team that you would want to play that you don't get to during this regular season?
That we wouldn't want to play?
That we would
want to play.
I guess, at this point, if you're making it to Hawaii, you're a top dog, so.
I don't know. Stan would probably be interested to play Shanghai.
That's true.
The revenge game angle.
Yeah, because we never got to play them much or at all before. Like playing against the big teams that we see pop off and play super well in the matches, like that would be something, at least for me, from my perspective, that would be super interesting. Like if Shanghai is still a top team for next season, which they should be, I would be interested to play against them.
Mm-hmm.
Or Seoul.
I want to see how the new Valiant roster stacks up against the rest of APAC as well.
Yeah, if you know things I don't leak it. But
no, they'll be in APAC. That's public knowledge. So
yeah, that will be interesting. Yeah, I think for someone in the chat is also saying New York. Yeah, this will be a weird season if we don't get to play New York at all because we have quite the rivalry with them, Boston and New York sports. So hopefully we get to play them at least once. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think Hangzhou Spark is a team that also looks pretty stacked on paper, and during a time when a lot of rosters are a little light, I think they have the deepest roster in the league. So a lot of talent over there, like some of the signings they made as well. So
Nice. Well, I think it's at this point that we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for the evening. It has been a jam-packed couple of hours. A lot of questions for you guys. I'm sorry that I've grilled you so much. But before we sign off, if you each had one message for fans in this little preseason fireside chat, what's the one thing that you would say to the folks watching?
Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for waiting throughout the off season. It starts soon, 2 months or something like that. So I'm very excited. I know the fans will be as well. But yeah, just be hopeful, be excited. I think we're going to do great. So
yeah, I think it's definitely a great season to be a Boston fan. Very, very promising. I think it's going to click. I think I personally really, really like again, it's like what Paris did last season, like the merging of Westerns and Korean with like a good structure above. I think it's going to be great. I have like super high hopes for this team. I hope you guys have too. Special mention for the French fans that we get as well from the Paris the Paris disband and us getting soon. And yeah, cheer for us next season. I think we're going to do great.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing what the guys are saying. I think there's been two seasons of misery, and we feel very happy with what we have this year, and we feel like we can do a lot better and bring Boston back to its former glory that everyone grew accustomed to in season one. So the fans have suffered through these tough times, and we're hope that we can do much better, and also at the same time kind of keep the fans in the loop, keep them engaged, with content like this and all of the other content that we're going to do. We have a fantastic content team here. You guys setting this up, and a lot of things that we're very excited to bring to the fans, and bring everyone along for the ride as the year progresses. And hopefully good results inside and outside of the server. So very excited for the year.
For sure. I know I'm very excited to work with you guys and see you guys hopefully next week. Fingers crossed for that. Like you said, we have a lot of content coming up. Let me tell you, we've been planning some stuff behind the scenes that I think you guys are really going to enjoy this year who are watching. So thank you for all of you who showed up and who have stuck around for 2 whole hours to watch us talk. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the support. I'll just go ahead and end this with a couple quick announcements again. Go ahead and hit the jersey command to enter our jersey giveaway if you haven't done that yet. Go ahead and check out our schedule on our website. You can hit up the socials command to see all of our different social media platforms, and hit up our merch shop on the merch or shop commands to take a look at what we've got in our shop right now with free shipping to the US. So go ahead and get your gear before the season starts so that you'll have it on our first game day. Thank you again, everyone who's tuned in. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let us know if you enjoyed it, and we'll try to set up some more of this throughout the season coming up. So have a great evening wherever you guys are at, and we'll see you guys soon. Catch you later.
See you guys.
Bye.